City. Intentionally. We're not fleeing anything. And besides, you don't flee to New York City unless you don't want to pay for anything anymore. And Zaphod Mad Money, the mayor, will pay for it for you, apparently, or he'll find some rich guy in Florida and find a way to tax him and make you pay for it. So while we sit, and actually, quite honestly, it probably would behoove me to walk the next half hour because we're on Interstate 95 approaching Washington, D.C., which probably means me walking would put me about 15 minutes ahead of the car I'm in right now. But that's our own issues this morning. So what are your rights? What are your rights? And we've talked a little bit about the Fourth and the Third Amendment yesterday, and the Fifth Amendment, thanks to Dr. Tony Take the Shot, Leave the Cannolis Fauci, the day before. So what is this battle royale over your rights? John Locke, the fellow who really all of this is based on, opined that you cannot have a right to something that requires someone else to perform a service for you. You didn't, for example, that's a great argument against the slavery of the 18th and 19th centuries here in the United States. You didn't have a right to have slaves because you can't have a right to somebody else's labors. Unfortunately, we live in a world where they think they can reinvent that paradigm and say, you should have the right to a doctor, or you should have a right to someone build you and maintain for you an apartment. That's the Bernie Sanders method. That's Arnie the Aardvark. I think you should have a house. I think as Americans, it's a great country. And their argument is that we're a wealthy nation. We're not a wealthy nation. We're a free nation that has created a lot of wealthy people. And that's where the Democrats come off the scale on this, and a lot of Republicans too. They just believe that if you get enough money, you can pay for things for people. And what is it that happens then? Oh yeah, they vote for you. That's the ultimate perversion. This is why I have said frequently, and not so much on this program or even its earlier iteration from 12 years ago, democracy is poison. I know, commonly held belief that democracy is the Lord High mugwump of all things liberty. No, democracy is actually an enemy of liberty. Democracy is mob rule. Democracy creates more pain and suffering because everything has to be a campaign. If everything is up for a vote, then you're constantly being campaigned. Here in Virginia, we get tired. We're told we're tired because we have elections every year. Well, imagine elections every day, every week. Every week they need you to vote for something. Somebody wants to rent a house to travelers. My gosh, they're making money in my neighborhood. We have to stop that. Don't believe me? Go to your next planning commission meeting and see, or check with your planning commission to see the next time homestay regulations are there. That's VRBO and Airbnb and all of that. Oh, we can't have people. And it's a coalition of the damned because you have the hoteliers in your hometown generally being hit for 10 to 15% of their take as room tax or lodging tax or convention tax. You name it, there's a tax on everything. I mean, if to Las Vegas, holy cow, you go to booking.com, hey, this room's $35. Well, and then there's a $79 a night resort fee because that's what government does. Government believes that your money is theirs and that they know how to spend it better than you. And what they don't realize, really, since the 30s, when FDR first started this, and really this is a fruit of the technocracy movement. 1913, the year the Fed was created, then of the 16th Amendment that stops your taxes from being a voluntary contribution of a bill payer to a withholding from your payroll. The government has year after year become more and more sure that the money you earn is really theirs and you're just renting it from them. But they want you to vote on things. They want you to vote for help for the poor. They want you to vote for things that the elderly need. Oh, the elderly, absolutely. It's always a pandering there, especially with the left, because the left will then go into the senior living communities and they'll take their absentee ballots and they'll all fill them out. So what are your rights? Matt Kibbe from FreedomWorks, or the founder of FreedomWorks, called "Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff." That's the United States. Now, the book is about 350 pages long, so it gets into more detail than that. But in essence, that's the United States. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Unfortunately, the human animal is blessed with creativity. Creativity leads to boredom. We come up with to punish people if they win, but in a group they are. That when my right to have my voice in the establishment of whatever republic we're going to have, whatever government we're going to have, is being usurped by people who aren't citizens. And I didn't even vote in New Jersey. I feel silly. I could have, I guess. They weren't looking very, very closely, were they? But there were thousands of New Jersey residents who had their civil rights violated. And the argument against the SAFE Act is it's not a federal government milieu because voting is a state's issue. Yes, but protecting my civil rights is a federal issue. And I don't think they're arguing it correctly, but that's me. And it's my afternoon constitutional, so I make up the rules. I don't think they're arguing it correctly. They need to be arguing it as a civil rights issue. Where the hell is Ted Cruz? He's too busy trying to save the NCAA from themselves. And I'm not kidding either. They can't pass the SAVE Act, but they can spend hours and hours of their 2.5-day work week debating what to do with the NCAA when they start paying all their athletes. I wish I was making this stuff up. This is why there's no good comedy anymore, because all this stuff is real. Where's Lewis Black been? Lewis Black, he would just read the news and the Rubaf. He likes to work a little harder than that. What are your rights? Well, they're codified in the Bill of Rights, but then we started to play around with amendments to the Constitution. And the longer you know me, the more you're going to know there is a simple rule that I have. If there's already a rule against something, don't write another one. Unfortunately, after 240 years, exactly what we do. We write new ones, because what good is this podium I'm standing behind if I can't bang my fist on it and say, somebody needs to do something about this immediately, immediately, immediately. So just remember that you have to be careful of people who are going to come in and tell you that they have rights for you, that they're going to help you get new rights. And if those rights involve somebody else doing something, whether it's building a house or telling you to bend over and cough, you can't have that as a right, because that's, what's the word? Slavery. If you claim that you have a right to somebody's work, you have a right to somebody doing things for you, it's not a right. So you have a right to gather with who you see fit. And this goes into our conversation yesterday about the flock cameras. Again, they're talking about it as a Fourth Amendment protection. It's really a First Amendment protection. If you're surveilling me and then questioning me about the people I'm congregating with, that's a violation of the First Amendment, not the Fourth or the Third. But then you have the right to your own religion. An awful lot of people getting really bent out of shape about mosques being built. Don't get caught in this trope. They're trying to push you and herd you into a place where you're trying to outlaw a religion. Look up Zuhdi Jasser. He is the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and I believe a Senate candidate in Arizona. He may not be anymore. That may have been last year. But Zuhdi Jasser is a brilliant mind, and he points to many of the things that are canonical in the Old Testament that Catholics don't do anymore. Stoning people for planting two crops next to each other, that kind of thing. That were probably very commonplace and logical laws 5,000 years ago. But they're not now, and we have set them aside to live in a free society. What Dr. Jasser and the American Islamic Forum for Democracy is saying, that's what Islam needs, is that clarification, almost a catechismic moment. The problem is there is no centralized Islam. It's not like Catholicism where there's a pope, or even the Protestant faiths with bishops and leadership within the churches. Why, there's not even anyone named Graham. So how do you do that? You have to go back to your rights. A Muslim has the right to freely and publicly celebrate their faith. They don't have the right to infringe on other people's rights. It's pretty straightforward. America gets it. You have a right to do as you see fit, as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's rights. So if you're going to stone somebody because they're not wearing a hijab, that's violating someone's rights. It has nothing to do with religion. Your religion cannot give you the right to harm someone else. Again, I'm the product of New York City public schools, and I get this. And it was the 70s, and we were bankrupt. So your right to speak freely, as long as you're not defaming someone else. I'll make a reasonable case. You do have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater. As a matter of fact, you have a responsibility to yell fire in a crowded theater if there's a fire in a crowded theater. If there's not, well, then you're going to pay the price for inciting a riot, because that's if you give false speech. And remember, we're in a world where we really should be teaching our kids the 10 Commandments, not because of their religious text, but because thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not steal. I think we're having problems with that in our schools. Thou shalt not murder. That's always a prickly one with some of my friends, because they say, no, Joe, it's thou shalt not kill. No, it's thou shalt not murder. And murder is decidedly different than kill. You can debate that with me at jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com, or post a comment here about that. If you think I'm wrong, that's fine. You have free speech rights just as much as I do. Your right to keep and bear arms. My favorite bit of the Bill of Rights. The word gun does not show up anywhere. You know why? Because the framers of the Bill of Rights, George Mason especially, said, you know what? There was a time before firearms that you needed to defend yourself with, say, a big sword. So to keep and bear arms, what happens if we invent phasers? For my Star Trek fans, you know who we are. I mean, you are. So we invent phasers or lightsabers for the Star Wars fans. You have a constitutional right to bear that lightsaber in public. If it said gun, well, then we'd be limited to guns, and then we'd actually be giving credence to the people who argue that, well, they meant a musket, barrel loaded, without whatever, all of the things that they're wrong about. You have a right to not have government officers in your house without your permission. That becomes a murky bit. That's the Third Amendment. Are government officers the intelligence community that looks over your internet and cell phone data, or pings the towers of your cell phone service to see where you were at any time, or goes through your email because you might have shared an email or got an email from somewhere outside of the country? However, you did give permission for those people to look at your third-party data when you clicked I accept. I think there's a reasonable question if that's informed consent, but we talked about that yesterday. Fourth Amendment, you secure in your papers and your documents and your work product without unreasonable search and seizure. Fourth Amendment doesn't say you can't be searched. It means that they have to go prove to a judge why they need to search your property. Fifth Amendment, Tony Fauci's favorite, self-incrimination, but also a right to face the accuser, to have an indictment, to stand before a grand jury and plead your case. Also the right to own and keep property and not have the government take it from you. And I've always argued, I feel in my gut that the 16th Amendment violates the Fifth Amendment. Provides for withholding tax. Well, that's my property. You're taking my property. You can't have an amendment that says you can take my property and one that says you can't. I'm told that by the way they wrote the 16th Amendment and making it a withholding tax, the argument is that it hasn't become my money because it was taken out of my paycheck before it got to me. But I have already done the work for that money. And I think there's a reasonable case. Any of you constitutional lawyers with nothing to do for a few years like to test this out into the Supreme Court. I'd love to see this case that taking my money that I've earned all without my permission and without due process and without just compensation is a violation of the Fifth Amendment. So these are your rights. Your rights to not be, given excessive bail, excessive, cruel, and unusual. These are rights that God has given you. Man has codified into the Bill of Rights that they're going to protect. That's it. That's all you do. But they get bored. And then something happens in their home district. And next thing you know, they're behind a podium with TV cameras on them. And they need to be seen as thugs from doing whatever. We're going to pass a law that's going to prohibit something that's already been prohibited. And each time, a little bit more liberty dies. And they start telling you, you have a right to a house, a right to 5. So I probably should get out and walk, but I think the tractor trailers would have something to say about that. So Anyway, I appreciate you watching, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. No, tomorrow's Saturday. We will talk to you again on Monday. As I tell my radio audience all the time, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
I think Lewis Black is dead.